I would not have known to pursue a gift like that. And that moved from $8,000 in the second year, 24, and then this past year, $30,000 gift.
I'm Rich Frazier.
And I'm Russ Fanoff.
Welcome to the Nonprofit Fundraising Exchange, a podcast from IPM Advancement.
We believe strong nonprofits can change the world, and our goal with each episode is to bring you insightful conversations with thought leaders from the nonprofit sector.
Let's dive in. Welcome, listeners, to the Nonprofit Fundraising Exchange. I'm Rich Frazier. Today, we're talking about fractional fundraising, a topic that's relevant to many of the smaller nonprofits working hard to raise money for their missions. Russ Fanoff, my co-host, good to see you.
Hello, Rich. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you, sir?
I'm good. I'm excited about this topic. You know, a lot of nonprofits don't have the budget to hire experienced fundraisers, and they either make do by asking staff to cover multiple jobs, or they might hire a consultant who can give them strategic direction, but then typically that person leaves, and then it's kind of up to the nonprofit to implement a plan.
So fractional fundraising is where the nonprofit hires an experienced fundraiser sort of as a part-time employee, contracted, as in a fraction of the 40-hour work week, hence the name fractional fundraising. It's a win for the nonprofit because they get access to talent that they couldn't otherwise afford. And it's a win for the fundraiser because they can work for multiple clients. So we're avoiding some burnout there too.
Yeah. And today, to discuss the in and outs of fractional fundraising, we welcome back Alan Knobloch, a consultant and fractional fundraiser himself, and Trica Hawkins from Arizona Wildlife Federation, which is an organization that's benefited from hiring fractional fundraisers. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
So if you could just give us a quick background. Alan, you've been on Nonprofit Fundraising Exchange a couple of times now, but go ahead, Alan, and give us your best brief intro, and then we'll turn it over to Trica.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for that. And I'm excited about today's topic. I have been in the development field for over 30 years, working in a variety of organizations, but primarily the latter half of my career in major and planned giving, and came across, I should say, I'm also a founding partner of Synergy Philanthropy Consulting and a frequent, podcaster for IPM. Thank you for that. Yeah, so I came across some things probably about 15 years ago that made me kind of think, hey, what's going on here? There's something that we're missing in our industry, and it was related to planned giving, but I'll tell more about that later, and I'll let Trica introduce herself.
Thanks, Alan. So I have zero experience prior to working with Alan in fundraising. I'm a wildlife conservation biologist and environmental educator. So that was never my role, even though I've worked with nonprofits my entire professional career. That's just not been my responsibility. I have written and received many grants. So that is the limit of my fundraising experience.
And she's a quick learner.
Well, you need to be in the nonprofit world. That's kind of par for the course.
Absolutely.
So let's jump right into it. Alan, you've been a consultant to nonprofits for a while now, but how did you get started doing fractional fundraising?
It was actually 20 years ago that I was part of an initiative in Arizona to help organizations raise more money through planned giving, in particular endowments that were very weak throughout the state. And we would find that you could teach them, but nothing was changing. So we built this program called the Endowment Building Initiative and engaged the CEO, development directors, and volunteers on initially a 24-month program. And they did really great. And we found out that almost all of them had a really good base of planned giving prospects, but it wasn't an FTE. So it was a go or no go. They either did nothing, tried a little bit, and then ended up stopping, or tried to hire somebody, but even though they did not have enough work for them, and that usually didn't work out. So that was a long time ago. And I dabbled in working with organizations while I had a full-time position, doing planned giving on the side in that regard, just doing a little bit to get their programs off the ground. But that's a little bit of how I think we got to this point, at least from my path. it's not really been a focused outreach marketed effort on our part. It's just, I think the market's moved to that, the industry's moved to that. One of the examples that I used initially, and don't really have to anymore, but there's an organization called Your Part-Time Controller. They've been doing bookkeeping and accounting work for nonprofits on a fractional basis for 30 years. So why can't we do this for fundraising? And I'm super excited that it's now a conversation in the general development realm, because I thought I was sort of the only Martian out there saying, hey, there's a possibility here.
So, Trica, I want to turn to you now and ask, what caused you to reach out for that fractional fundraising help at the Arizona Wildlife Federation?
Well, when you don't have, or when your organization doesn't have any experience in fundraising, you really don't know where to start. And it's kind of a big leap to commit to hiring an entire staff person and all of everything that goes with that. So knowing that we wanted to increase our fundraising capacity, we felt like hiring somebody under contract was going to be a great way to go. And in essence, a first step, and it felt like a safer step and a move towards understanding development and increasing the fundraising for the Wildlife Federation.
Trica, how big is your staff right now?
Well, we've actually hired, I think, 2 people since Alan was with us. So currently we have 5 staff members and a contractual admin.
Okay.
So I'm curious, when you reached that point where you knew you needed to bring somebody in to help with fundraising, but you didn't want to take that big leap of hiring somebody, what were the implications of that point of not taking any actions, of not addressing that in a timely manner?
The implications of not doing it. Well, that's an interesting perspective. Well, we were seeing an attrition or a decline in our membership at the time. There was no one on our staff that was dealing with nurturing and stewarding of our supporters and members prior to growing our staff. I mean, when Alan came on, I think there were only 3 of us on staff. But even prior to that, we only had 1 part-time admin person. And how we managed to, we were still thriving, but how we managed to do that is a mystery of the universe. It's perhaps because we've been around for 100 years, we had a following, but we were at a point that we realized that if we didn't nurture those supporters and members that we had, then they would likely fall off and not continue to support us. We knew that we were at a time that we really needed to strengthen those relationships and understand who our members and supporters were.
So let me turn that around then. What were some of the first benefits that you saw after hiring somebody?
Well, those were pretty immediate and wonderful. And one of the first things really is that our understanding of what we had and what we needed really increased. I hadn't even looked at our CRM. I didn't even know how to really look at our CRM to understand who were our major donors, who were life members, and what to do about that and how to nurture those. And that's something that Alan jumped on right away and helped us jump on right away. Just identifying those major donors and that was something that was important to do. And as well, just the understanding of moves management, that concept alone, like you nurture
that's a big one.
Someone and how do you move them up in that chain of giving? I didn't even know that term before Alan, but so the increase in understanding of what we had, what we needed to do, and as well the limitations of our CRM. Those were the, I think, most immediate and profound benefits.
So, Alan, let's hear about your perspective going into this relationship with Arizona Wildlife Federation. What was your approach? How did you assess their needs and determine what kind of fundraising strategy would be the best starting place for them?
Sure. So I knew, hey, number one, the organization needs to get their hands around who their donors are, and they need to, build a portfolio of their best donors because they're supporting 80 to 90% of the work. If you get that right, you're going to be in good shape. If you mess that up and lose some of those people, you're going to fall behind, especially in this day and age. So kind of getting in, understanding their database and who the givers were. And here's a little story that I smile about all the time, and I'd love to hear, Trica, where you are with this relationship. But ours as fundraisers, our discipline is to kind of look at the numbers, where they come from. And I found a gift that was exemplary for them in a prior year, and it bumped their overall number up. And I did some investigating and said, well, who is this person? We have to replace a very large gift this year if you don't get another gift from them. So tell me the story. Did some digging, found the name and a phone number, and Trica followed up, and Trica has had a wonderful relationship with this person. Their giving has tripled, Trica, or I don't know what's the latest is, but it was one of those things where I think it would have just floated on by if somebody with that eye hadn't really been there looking at that. And I think it was a very meaningful gift for the organization and a particular program that they're growing.
Absolutely, Alan. That's one of the first things that pops up in my mind. I would not have known to pursue a gift like that and to reach out and create relationships with someone. And that moved from $8,000 in the second year, 24, and then this past year, $30,000 gift to support one of our programs. And I would never have done that without the guidance of Alan.
So Trica, do you see that relationship as kind of a coach relationship, as well as having someone who's actually going to knock out some things on your to-do list?
I think in our relationship and our experience with Alan, it was mostly a coach relationship.
Okay.
I actually was the one who did do a lot of the outreach and campaign work, et cetera, but I would not have known to do that at all. And Alan also would write scripts for myself and for our board members to do some outreach. So I see it as more of a coaching, at least our relationship, except for a few tasks that Alan totally took on.
I think a consultant that was in there to teach a moves management and say, here's what you should be doing, and off they go, wouldn't necessarily have been looking at that level. I mean, I'm in their database looking at folks and saying, this is somebody who has my attention, and building portfolios for Trica and for their executive director, as opposed to telling them how to build a portfolio. Now, scripting out the outreach and everything and saying, you're not hiring me as a consultant to do the solicitation, but I'll walk right to the edge of that appointment with you and get you ready and confident. Mm-hmm. That, I think, is the difference in what we're calling fractional fundraising. Is we can do that as senior consultants much faster than somebody who hires a junior fundraiser, because that's all they can afford, who they have to train up and won't have that sensitivity until much later in their career.
Yeah.
So Trica, in the time that Alan has stopped working with the Federation, how have you been doing since then, right? And so what are the long-term impacts that you've seen, particularly when it comes to donor engagement and donor relationships?
Well, I can say, Rich, that we have actually now hired a full-time development director, and we feel ready for that. And as well, we can hand that person the reins with some specific, this is what we need, and these are the people we need to outreach to. So it's like taking that next step for which we would not have been prepared without Alan's help, and that year of working or more of working together and getting to where we were ready for that. And we knew that investment in a full-time staff, that we were ready for it, and we had that confidence. And that person is great and taking the bull by the horns and going, and thank heavens, because my time is freed up to do the things that I'm best at, where my skill set is most needed.
Oh, that's fantastic. Congratulations. Just curious, do you have any data on how working with Alan helped improve fundraising?
Well, I could say that over the time that Alan was working with us, our donations did increase by roughly 20% over that time. And we feel like that's just the very beginning. But as well, just those relationships, and I kind of mentioned it before, to reach out to some of these supporters of the Wildlife Federation, create that relationship and see how their donations increased over time, just because of what we learned about reaching out and asking the right questions and nurturing those relationships.
Investing in fundraising is often a tough nut to crack for a lot of boards of directors and executive directors. So what I'm hearing, though, is that the work that your fractional fundraiser, Alan, did with the organization kind of showed them the return on investment in putting that investment into fundraising and development. So that made it easier to hire a development director?
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head there. That's our experience. Mm-hmm.
Great business model I have, huh? Put myself out of work.
That's the best business model. That's how you have happy clients.
And I didn't realize, I know that maybe you mentioned that a while back, Trica, but it's really awesome for me to hear that you guys have taken that step and to know that that person's going to have more meat on the bone, so to speak, to launch off of. And so I'm looking forward to seeing and hearing about your wins and progress well into the future.
Hi, this is Curtis Schmidt, producer of the Nonprofit Fundraising Exchange. If you're a nonprofit professional who has questions about your program, or maybe you feel like you've taken your advocacy, fundraising, or membership effort as far as you can and you need some fresh ideas, then we have a special offer for you today. NPFX podcast listeners can get a free 30-minute consultation with IPM Advancement, no strings attached, when you go to ipmadvancement.com/free. Just enter a few details and an IPM team member will contact you to follow up. It's that easy. That website again is ipmadvancement.com/free. Thanks for listening, and we hope to talk to you soon. Now let's return to the episode.
So when those folks initially reach out to you, typically, like at this point in this evolution of fractional fundraising, what are they asking for? What's the first thing they're interested in?
So generally just help. So my model is they're asking for basics, and I'm saying, you know what? If you lose 2 annual donors versus 1 major donor, you are way behind. So I immediately shift the conversation really to looking at their portfolio of best donors, even if it's 20, 10, whatever. Who are your best donors? How do you institutionalize your outreach to them so that you don't lose them? Then how do you grow them and how do you put other people into that spot?
Okay.
So really, a lot of times it's just like, we need help. And they come to us from someone who says, well, I think you should talk to Alan, or I think you should talk to Alan's partner, Michelle. At this point, that's how it's come to us. But because I've been doing this for so long, I have materials generated in proposals and such that I think have been more thought out perhaps than other consultants in terms of how we can help them and specifically how we can help them.
Okay.
Trica, I'm curious what kind of advice you would give to other smaller nonprofits who are looking for a fractional fundraiser. What should they look for? What kinds of questions should they ask? What kind of credentials and experience should they be looking for?
I was thinking that right before you asked that too. We had created a job description, but honestly, we kind of went online and looked up job descriptions for development people, right? Because we really knew so little. So investing the time in at least having a general idea of what you need, what your organization needs, that's huge. Have that before the search, even if it means going online and saying, what is it that we need? We interviewed several different folks. I can't remember our outreach effort in that recruitment process or whatever job search process. And honestly, and Scott, our executive director, we're similar in this way. We look at credentials, but there's also a gut feeling that I go with, and Scott trusts me because I would be the primary person working with whoever we hired. But Scott follows that gut feeling too. And I could I believe in that strongly. And I would urge others to feel that, because you're going to be working very closely with the person that you hire. And I felt really comfortable with Alan when we interviewed him. I felt a connection that he could say something and I could understand it, that he wasn't going to force something on us that we weren't ready for, that could be one of those red flags. If somebody's going to come in and just take over your organization and say, you need this and you need that and you need that, that's not comfortable. Yeah, we know we need some things, but that's a really difficult place to be in. And we never felt that from Alan. It was comfortable, and there was an obvious relationship where we could work together. So I would really urge folks to feel comfortable with whoever they hire.
That gut feel is pretty important there, right? You got to know that that person's going to fit within the culture of the organization. Alan, I'm going to turn this back to you. What should nonprofits be looking for when hiring that fractional fundraiser?
Very good question, and something we as consultants, I think, use all the time, but it's the same here. And that is, a lot of us can do the work. We know what is needed, but the fit and absolutely the vibe you get and the feeling of being able to work well together, I think, is more important than a specific knowledge base, especially for smaller organizations that really, we as career development officers, we can do this stuff. We don't necessarily need to have a master's degree. We're just doing basic stuff to help them get in place the things that they can build off of. So really, I just feel as though that connection is most important, feeling like you can work well together.
And what should fractional fundraisers be looking for in working with nonprofits?
From the perspective of what I would be looking for and consultants should be looking for is there does need to be a base level of capability. The organization does need to have someone that's going to be the lead that you can work with and that you can work closely with and that you can ask to get work done, that you can ask for access to materials and information. They need to understand, know what they don't know, and be coachable and be willing to learn to get to that next level so that they do grow I would say I've never had a client that's not been the case.
Mm-hmm.
But for sure, there does need to be some base level of prospects, of good donors, some effort to that point that you can work with and grow on their behalf. So it's not you're talking to somebody who's been on, starting for a month, but it's also, you're not working with a university or a hospital. You're working with an organization that has some resources and some capacity to take on what you're asking them to take on.
Right.
And I think it's important too for our listeners to know that, fractional fundraising, as we understand it, comes in a lot of different forms, right? You can have someone like Alan who's going in and helping an organization like the Arizona Wildlife Federation and, really specific to kind of covering a lot of bases and helping them get to the point where they can hire someone. And you, on the other side of the coin, might have an organization that just lost its chief development officer, has a very structured, kind of well-oiled machine, and they're just looking for someone to kind of come in and just, fill that role for a little while. And we hear about those opportunities quite a bit in the consulting space, and they're coming up more and more often now that more organizations have gone remote.
Yeah, that interim role is very important. And I guess depending on what role that consultant is fulfilling, that would determine what the day-to-day interaction looks like with that organization. I'm curious, though, what was your day-to-day interaction like between the two of you, Alan and Trica?
We set up weekly meetings and had an agenda, an objective, rolling agenda, not super hardcore or this or else, and did the work in between, communicated by email and text and whatnot and phone calls. Since they don't really have an office and don't really need an office, we just regularly met on Zoom and kind of did the work that way.
And Alan, you mentioned that you were able to get into their donor database and kind of, look at what the state of the fundraising program was and which donors you wanted to focus on. Was that something just, speaking of the technical access, were you able to access the database remotely? And is that an important thing for people to be looking for?
We have 9 or 10 clients we're doing this with, and we have a confidentiality agreement in our contracts, and also we sign special ones for organizations who have that concern. And so And that has honestly has never been a problem. I had anticipated 20 years ago when we were starting to see this in a plan giving context that people would push back saying, oh no, you can't do fundraising for multiple organizations. It has not come up once. Any clients, any conversation, very, very rarely. I honestly, when I was working as a development officer, I saw maybe 2 or 3 donors that overlapped organizations, if that. It's just not a problem, and a confidentiality agreement, and really telling the clients that, you know, we would be out of business quickly if we abused that. So nobody has had a problem in that regard.
Yeah. I think for our consultant listeners, the only sticky situation might be if you're working in the same market for 2 organizations that were basically either competitors or peers, kind of doing the same kind of work in the same market, might have access to the same donors. You want to watch out for that.
Well, we'll let you know how that goes. We have 2 in Phoenix.
Oh, really? Okay.
And they're both aware of each other, and they're aware of our work. And I think, you know, we have signed confidentiality agreements with both. It's not exactly the same kind of work, but again, that, you know, we work through the donors. We're looking for their best donors in order to build the systems around that. And their best donors are usually unique to each organization. If they're not, we would completely divulge that to both. And asked if, you know, where those boundaries are. But again, I've never had that conversation with anybody.
Trica, I'm interested to hear your feedback relative to what Alan just said, but also I want to ask if there were sort of any unexpected benefits, short-term or long-term, that you found after hiring Alan.
Well, definitely I wanted to say that we felt really confident having Alan access and understand our database. And because of that, he shared the limitations of that CRM, that database that we were using. And I wouldn't have known that previously. I primarily used it to send out emails and our e-news, our monthly e-news. I didn't really understand those donor management limitations. And Alan, I don't know if we've shared with you, but we just did our entire transition to a new database, the one that you and I had looked at and played in the sandbox, so to speak, before.
Yay!
And the beauty of that, and I guess that also kind of answers the question you were asking, Rich. A benefit is that when we were looking at maybe migrating all of our data to this new, that was so overwhelming. And it was just really Alan and I that were looking at it and deciding, oh, is this something that we can do, want to do? It was so overwhelming. Well, this year, we just finished like 2 weeks ago. We had the entire team, Alan. We had Amy and Elise and Scott and our new development director, Keith. All of us were a team in this transition. So it wasn't quite as overwhelming. Like you and I were just sitting, it was just you and I, like, how are we going to do this? So we were way more prepared and understood what we really needed in a new database. So that was a huge benefit that we've realized right now, and it's exciting.
That's awesome to hear. And I will say that we actually put a number of organizations recommending and some are implementing databases, either didn't have them or they weren't serving their purpose. So that is a big piece of our initial work, is really making that assessment and recommendation. A lot of them complain about the cost, but then we're saying, but your database doesn't reach out automatically and raise money. And it also costs you time and manpower to put gifts into the system you're using, which a lot of our clients are actually in Excel, which is a little scary, but we're converting all of them into, you know, reasonably priced online databases that they can use to go on offense. And that, I think, is what you know, Trica and I felt needed to happen at Arizona Wildlife Federation. I'm so excited to hear that you guys took that step.
Excellent. Well, Trica and Alan, this has been a great conversation to give us a little glimpse behind the curtain of fractional fundraising. For folks out there who are interested in learning more and learning about what IPM Advancement does with fractional fundraising, you can visit our website, ipmadvancement.com/fractional fundraising. And before we go, I'd like to ask each of you to just give us a couple of takeaways. What do you want listeners to take away from this conversation? Trica, maybe we could start with you from that perspective of the hiring, the person who actually hired a fractional fundraiser for your organization.
Hiring a fractional fundraiser was such a benefit for our organization, because it really moved us along this path of increasing our capacity to be able to understand our donors, our supporters. But honestly, more than anything, it was the learning about relationships.
Yeah.
Not just our relationship with Alan as a consultant, but which was great. I mean, to me, that was so important. Love you, Alan. Thank you.
Thank you. Love you too.
You're a keeper. But the relationships that I know myself and some of our board members and our other staff have created and nurtured with our supporters as a result of our understanding and realizing that fundraising is about relationships.
Great. And Alan, as the provider in this case, the service provider, and the fractional fundraiser, what are your big takeaways for folks that they should get out of this conversation?
Just don't be afraid to look at this as an option. I think it's so new and so different in the industry, where organizations think they have to go from all volunteer to hiring a fundraiser, or combining those skills, with an executive director who is generalist in a lot of ways, but not necessarily good at anything. That's not a criticism. That's just kind of human nature. So don't be afraid to look into this. What's really been rewarding is sort of initial kind of vibe and vision has really played out on the ground with organizations that, I'm many of them that I've worked with are doing well and on their own and don't need me anymore. So don't be afraid of looking at this as a transition to a permanent situation. We have been approached to do some interim work. We're also coaching folks in a hands-on way who are already in this. Many fundraisers get drawn into events and annual and don't understand, even though they fundraised for a long time, how to be a good major gift officer, or at least hold the fort on that. So we're working with several that actually we build the portfolio and teach them how to, and they retain us to just do strategy. So don't be afraid to go down this road, I think, is what I would say to organizations. And I think they can benefit in a great way and much quicker by hiring folks that have a lot of experience and are willing to step in this role.
Great. That's true. Where can our listeners find out more about you? Trica, let's start with you first.
Well, the Arizona Wildlife Federation, we've got a website. It's www.azwildlife.org.
Okay. So Alan, how about you? Other than through IPM Advancement, where can people find you?
Yes, well, they can find me through IPM, but also I'm a founding partner with Synergy Philanthropy, which you can Google and visit our website. Love to hear from folks and hear if there are other folks out there doing this, and other stories. Would be great to start building a network of knowledge that we can move this industry maybe further down the road on this topic.
Terrific.
Awesome.
Alan Knobloch, great to have you on the show again. And Trica O'Shant-Hawkins, nice to see you. And thank you for sharing your experience on fractional fundraising today. That's the show, folks. I want to thank our producer, Curtis Schmidt. And thank you, listeners, for once again tuning in. And Russ, you done me in, and I felt it. It's always a pleasure, my friend.
Always a pleasure, Rich. Thanks a lot. And thanks everybody for listening. We really, really appreciate it. If you get a chance, please leave us a review on whatever podcast application you listen on. It really helps us in the category of getting more people to listen to us. So thank you so much. And Rich, thank you just for being you.
It's all I can be. And sometimes it's pretty awkward. With that, thanks, Russ. We'll see you next time on the Nonprofit Fundraising Exchange.
Okay, bye-bye.
That concludes this episode of the Nonprofit Fundraising Exchange. Thanks to our panel for sharing their insights and expertise. If you'd like to learn more about our panel members or any of the organizations or resources featured in this episode, we will include links in the show notes. If you like this podcast, we would love your help spreading the word. First, please subscribe in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or your favorite podcast app so you always know when a new episode is released. Second, forward the episodes you like to friends and colleagues, or share them on social media. Word of mouth is one of the best ways you can help us reach more nonprofit professionals like yourself. And if you use Apple Podcasts or Audible, please leave us a review. Positive reviews are how many listeners decide whether or not to try out a new podcast. We appreciate your help. For suggestions on topics, guests, or nonprofit organizations you'd like to hear on the podcast, send an email with the subject heading NPFX suggestion to contact@ipmadvancement.com. For back episodes and more resources like white papers, infographics, and blog articles, please visit the free IPM Advancement Nonprofit Resource Library at ipmadvancement.com/resources. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.